It seemed that I had dropped my handkerchief the other day when I had been writing my note. I probably pulled it out accidentally when I fished for the quill from my pocket. I would have left it, but that handkerchief was a favourite of mine. Aldrich had gifted it to me in simpler times, and I was eager to retrieve it. I supposed I wanted to preserve something of our marriage, even if it was just a bit of cloth. It took half the day, but I finally found a moment over luncheon to return to the gardens. However, when I got there, I heard voices. "It's all right. The Queen is too busy working right now. She won't be here." "Are you sure? This doesn't feel right, miss." "The Queen often visits here, so why can't I? She's not that different from me. The King beds her, and the King beds me." I stopped dead in my tracks and pressed myself into a nearby hedge of cedar. Those voices belonged to Rose and her maids. Through the fronds, I could see the concubine sitting in my precious nest chair, while one of her maids pushed it like a swing, and the other stood nearby cutting fruit. Hot anger seared through my chest at the sight of anyone enjoying themselves in my secret refuge, never mind her. "Does the Queen really own the entire palace, or only her apartments?" The two maids shrugged, and I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from speaking. Did the concubine still not know that the Western Palace was the domain of the Queen? No, she must know that, otherwise she wouldn't be going to the trouble of avoiding me. Rose continued her chattering. "Well, it will all be mine one day anyway." I felt as though I'd been kicked in the gut. It will all be mine. Did the foolish girl really believe that? No matter how many times Aldrich bedded her, I would still be the Queen. Our marriage was sacred and permanent. It was as much the foundation of the kingdom as were the stones and laws upon which it was built. The sound of her idiotic maids tittering gleefully brought me back to the present. I just couldn't take it anymore. I set my jaw, emerged from my hiding place, and marched right towards them. Rose jumped to her feet at the sight of me. The maids, knowing full well they had been speaking ill of the nobility when they should have been keeping their mouths shut, leapt back in surprise. I quickly looked around for the two new ladies-in-waiting, but they were nowhere to be seen. Obviously, they didn't get along with Rose, and they'd been sent back by the maids. The three of them shrank from me as I strode forward, but I was fixated on the nest chair and my handkerchief, which Rose had evidently used to sit on. When she registered the direction of my gaze and my hurt, she spoke hurriedly. "My apologies, Your Majesty. The chair was wet and I thought the handkerchief was trash." "Don't be foolish. The handkerchief has my emblem embroidered on it. You knew very well that it wasn't trash, and you're sitting in my chair." Rose flinched at my curt tone, but I didn't care. I was glad to see her discomfort. That chair was my most cherished possession, and this was my one secret place in the entire kingdom. The one place I could be myself, free of judgment. It all felt ruined now, tainted by the concubine and her mischief. I tried to tamp down my anger before speaking. "Give me the handkerchief." Rose reached under her pert behind for it and handed it back to me. I cringed to feel the heat of her still trapped within the cloth. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I didn't know." Rose stood and came towards me, her cheeks pink in the cool, silvery air. "I thought it was just an empty chair and an old handkerchief." "Don't play the fool with me, girl. These two maids may believe that you are sweet and innocent, but I can see the calculations behind your eyes. The ambition. You knew what you were doing all along. But it doesn't matter what I believe. What does matter is that you follow the rules. Rules that cannot be broken, no matter how much you wish they could be. There are rules the king must follow, that I must follow, and there are even rules that a concubine must follow. The first of which is this: do not come to the Western Palace anymore. It is not your place, it is mine. No goodwill will come from us seeing each other." But I want to be friends with Her Majesty." Not this again. But my reproach caught on my tongue as Rose burst into tears. I was furious with myself that I felt any sort of pity towards her, but the sight of that crying, beautiful face was akin to a spell. I shook my head, releasing myself of such dark magic. I smiled deliberately. You can be friends with the next concubine. Rose sniffled and looked up at me, aghast. The next concubine? Why, yes. Now that the king has taken one, why would he stop there? He's sure to bring in another concubine after you. He needs to slake his lust, after all. Rose turned pale, her pride wounded and her vision of her future wavering. She stared at me for a moment longer, before picking up her skirts and running from the gardens, followed closely by her maids. I should have felt remorse. A gentler queen would have, but I only felt a sense of justice.
What's wrong? Why are you crying? When Aldrich had come to Rose's apartments after the day's work, he had expected to find her effervescent and lustful, waiting for him in bed as usual. Instead, as soon as he entered the room, Rose leapt into his arms, sobbing.
Your Majesty, when you tire of me, will you bring in another woman as your new concubine?
Why would you think such a thing? Who have you been speaking to?
The Queen.
Aldrich felt a cold wash of dread come over him. Carefully, he disentangled himself from Rose and took a step back. Why were you talking to the Queen? Where did this happen?
There is an abandoned chair in the Western Palace garden. No one was using it, and I thought it was a nice place to—
You went to the Western Palace again?
I went when the Queen wasn't there. She works in the Imperial Palace during the day. It is a secluded garden, Your Majesty, not near the building.
But Rose could see that Aldrich wasn't convinced. He was too worried about her speaking to the Queen. He wasn't answering her question. Needing to distract him, Rose summoned a cascade of tears, and she broke down in front of the king, throwing herself into his embrace. Aldrich hesitated, but as the sobs racked Rose's body against his, he softened. Gently, he wiped away her tears and took her chin in his fingers. All right, let me think. Let me get this straight. You were sitting in a chair that no one was using, and you were purposefully avoiding the Queen.
Yes, but then she came out of nowhere. She frightened me, my lord. She was so angry, and she terrified my maids. All I said to her was, I want to be friends with you.
And because of that, she insinuated that I would bring in another concubine. To replace you.
Will you, my lord? Will you love another woman besides me? Your Majesty, will you betray me?
Rose stared wildly at him with her doe-like eyes, searching. Just looking at her, Aldrich knew the answer. He pulled her small frame into his strong body, hugging her tightly and repeating the words, "That's not possible."
My workday had been long, and I was eager to return to my chambers and slip into a more comfortable dress. My head throbbed, though I doubted that it had anything to do with my usual palace duties. It was because of Rose and the constant threat of her looming over me. My mother's words echoed in my head. Do not get involved in the affairs of the king and his concubines. Wryly, I laughed at myself. But Mother, I am trying. She just keeps appearing in front of me. Countess Eliza? I asked, looking up from my daydream. Yes, Your Majesty. Would you would send a note to my mother— No, never mind. You want me to bring Duchess Troby? No, it's all right. I'll see her on the winter solstice anyway. Your Majesty, I see that you've been uneasy. You should consult the Duchess. She is very wise, and she loves you very much. Counsel would probably ease my mind, but it would only burden my mother, and I didn't want to do that to her. She worried about me enough as it was. I know, Eliza, but I'll find the time during the festivities to speak to her. Besides, my mother must have heard about Rose by now. Yes, Your Majesty, I believe that everyone has. I grimaced, but it seemed that Eliza had something else on her mind. What is it? Highness, if it isn't impertinent for me to ask, how does Lady Laura fare? Eliza, you could never be impertinent. I hear she is quite well, and wants to return to the palace as soon as possible. Very good, Your Highness. I think it may be best that she returns before the solstice celebrations. Then everyone can see her at the parties, just as they expect. The fewer rumours, the better. Indeed, I sighed. Countess, you can leave me now if you like. I'm going to go to bed a little early. I wanted to be alone, and talking about Laura made me miss her bright energy. As the Countess left the room, I unpinned the jewels from my hair and placed them on the dresser. Finally comfortable, I retrieved my journal from the bedside table and curled into the settee to write my daily entry. But the door to the corridor clicked behind me. Eliza? There was no answer, and yet I could feel a presence in the room. I stood up and with a pounding heart walked around the corner. Aldrich. To my surprise, it was the king standing in my room. How long has it been since my husband came to the Western Palace? I couldn't help but think about the last time he had entered my chambers unannounced, desperate and yearning for me, his eyes dark with lust. I had been more than willing to accept him, and he had spread me on the bed like a feast before him. He had taken his time with me, a slow, torturous pace that had brought me wave after wave of pleasure, until he came into me, and we both went over the edge. Aldrich couldn't have looked more different this time. His face was shadowed and troubled, but I noticed that his gaze flickered to the bed. He remembered the last time he was here as well as I did. When I spoke, my voice was tight, though which emotion strangled me, I wasn't certain. May I help you, Your Majesty? He struggled to begin, running a hand down his face before answering.
Rose told me what you said to her. It's not like you, Bronwyn.
What did I say?
That I would take another concubine after I tired of her.
Aldrich, this is so exhausting. Of course you'll take another concubine. Have you ever heard of another king who has broken his vows with only one? Listen, I may have spoken out of turn, but Rose insists on interfering with my life. Can you even fathom how difficult it is for me to know of her existence? Never mind having to see her, speak with her, and tolerate her. How would you feel if you had to befriend my lover? I've told you that I will not stand in your way, as is the law, but I cannot abide being involved. So I simply told her to befriend the next concubine when she comes along. However, instead of diffusing the situation, my explanation only seemed to anger Aldrich further. Aldrich's face reddened in anger as he stood across from me in the dim silence of my chambers.
Bronwyn, have you taken a lover?
Why would you ask that?
You just said it yourself. How would I like to have to befriend your lover?
I took a step back. Every muscle in Aldrich's body was strung with tension, and it seemed to take every ounce of his self-control not to reach out for me and take me in his arms, to make me his. He was jealous. But as much as it sent a thrill through my body to see him so, I couldn't hide the truth. Of course I haven't, nor do I intend to. Unlike you, I take my vows seriously, both to you and the kingdom. The relief that coursed through him was obvious. A part of me felt glad to alleviate him of that burden, while another part, a darker part, wanted to take a lover just so that Aldrich could feel as terrible as I had these past days. It felt good to know I still wielded that sort of power over him. To dispel his emotions, Aldrich began pacing the room. Then he turned to me.
Must you be so cruel?
Cruel? If you and Rose left me be, I wouldn't have to be cruel. How many times do I have to repeat that I don't want to get involved with you and your concubine? Yet my declaration does not protect me from hearing about her, from crossing paths with her, from discussing her with my own husband.
Bronwyn, I've never known you to be so unreasonable.
I'm being perfectly reasonable. Did the former king ever talk about Countess Sophie to the former queen? Aldrich paled, as I knew he would, when I brought up his father's lover. Perhaps I was being cruel, for I was glad to see that I could cause him pain, though I was furious at myself for feeling badly that I did, all at the same time. He staggered back from me, needing to distance himself from that memory. I hoped he would just leave, I didn't want to argue anymore. But Aldrich wasn't done.
This room is full of beautiful furniture, full of velvets, silks, and precious jewels. You can buy anything you want. Bronwyn, you have the admiration of an entire empire, and yet you are cruel to someone who has known nothing but suffering in her life.
Worse than anger, Aldrich's eyes were filled with disappointment. He saw the effect that emotion had on me, and so he continued, needing the last word.
She was also a subject of yours before she was my concubine. She suffered under your rule, and yet you did nothing to improve a fellow woman's situation. Do you not feel sorry for her?
I wanted to say I didn't, just to spite him, but I couldn't hold back the truth. Yes, I do. Satisfied that he had won the argument, the king turned on his heel to leave. My legs shook beneath me, and I managed to stay standing until Aldrich had shut the door. But I collapsed into Eliza's arms the moment she re-entered the room, overcome with emotion. Little did I know that unwelcomed ears had been listening to our argument. Really? The king was angry with the queen because of me? Rose asked Cheryl, wide-eyed, and the maid was more than eager to relay the information she had gleaned. Yes, miss, I'm sure of it. They were shouting at the top of their voices. Rose pushed herself out of the velvet chair, covering her blushing cheeks with her hands, too overwhelmed to sit still. My goodness. No one has ever defended me like that before. He protected me. The other maid, Kaya, continued the story. Not only that, miss, but he put an announcement on the Eastern Palace doors, declaring strict punishment to anyone who brings up the false rumor that you are a runaway slave. Rose couldn't hold back her tears any longer, and she cried freely as her maids showered her in compliments. The king really loves you, Miss Rose. Yes, he really does. Truly, miss. How could anyone not love someone so beautiful and innocent as you? 'Tis like a fairy story, miss. Rose was inclined to agree, but felt so overjoyed that she couldn't form the words. She was even less prepared when, a moment later, 3 servants entered the room to deliver a large swing chair. Is this? Seeing their mistress unable to speak, Cheryl and Kaya stepped in, directing the servants to place the chair in the middle of the room. Stepping closer, Kaya found a note card attached to the bow. She held it out for Rose to take, but the concubine quickly shook her head. Will you read it to me? I can't see through my tears. Believing the lie, Kaya opened the envelope and relayed the message. 'Tis a gift from the king, miss. He says, now you can sit wherever you want, my prey. Unlike the nest chair, this one was adorned with jewels and filigree of gold and silver, while the cushions were feather-stuffed and made of the finest velvets. Rose couldn't help herself. She threw herself into the chair and burst into tears of joy. I had been crying into my pillow when I heard a tap on the glass of my window. Wiping the tears from my eyes, I looked up to find the midnight hawk hovering just outside. My heart leapt, and I rushed to the casement to swing it open, whereupon the bird flew into my chambers and landed softly, of all places, on my bed. Oh, my dear sweet bird, I have missed you. As I dabbed at my cheeks, the feathery creature peered at me with its large, violet-coloured eyes, studying me closely. Do you have a message for me? It was silly, but I felt that the only thing in the world that would bring me comfort at this moment was more of my secret correspondence. To my surprise, the midnight hawk nodded, as if it understood my question, then held its leg out to me. Smiling, I gave it a gentle pat, and then untied the note and revealed it to be there. It was a short but efficient message once again, and yet the words of this stranger, whom I had neither face nor name for, lifted the heaviness from my mind. The bird will be named Majesty, as you wish, but keep in mind he is a male. Oh, you're a boy. My apologies, I didn't know, dear sir. But now that I have named you Majesty, I don't think I can call you anything else. The name is stuck in my mind, I'm afraid. Will you be terribly offended? The bird blinked at me for a moment, apparently resigning itself to its fate. Smiling and wiping away the last of my tears, I gave the handsome creature another pat before heading to my desk. Majesty followed me closely, of course, and watched as I took out a small sheet of parchment paper and wrote my reply. I didn't know he was a male, an unexpected surprise. Good men are so hard to come by. I rolled up the note and tied it to Majesty's leg, glancing at the calendar. The winter solstice celebrations were just around the corner, and the guests were due to start arriving tomorrow at the palace. Would I finally get to meet the Midnight Hawk's master? Despite myself, I blushed at the thought. The next morning was terribly busy, as it was my duty to greet the endless arrivals from lands far and wide. The faces of lords and ladies, dukes and duchesses swam before me. It was a difficult job keeping them straight, though an important one. I couldn't cause a diplomatic incident by calling someone the wrong name. Your Majesty, Countess Eliza whispered into my ear as we stood outside of the facade of the Imperial Palace. Look at the next carriage. Turning my gaze outwards, I saw a beautiful and regal string of horses approaching, pulling someone of special magnificence to be sure. Who do you believe it is? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, though I had my own secret hopes. I believe it's the emissary from the Celestial Isles. Perhaps their king, but perhaps their prince. My heart skipped as I considered this possibility and looked down the long sweep of the limestone steps. The ornate carriage pulled up at the bottom. The insignia certainly looked to be from the Celestial Isles. I smoothed the front of my skirts and touched my hair, before chastising myself for this girlish ritual of preening. I was still a married woman, whether Aldrich treated me as such or not. Still, I had to make a good impression, as they were our closest ally. But historically, there had been some times when the Celestial Isles had also been our greatest enemy. I watched as a footman opened the carriage door, admitting a man into the sunlight. The prince. Prince Henry was the much younger brother of the King of the Isles, and normally shouldn't stand to inherit the throne. However, he was rumoured to be second in line, as the king had no children, despite already having a queen and 3 official concubines. As the prince ascended the steps, the political ramifications of meeting him ran wild through my mind, but all time seemed to stop as he alighted before me. I had often heard rumours of how handsome Henry was, but I saw now that even they didn't do the man justice. He was tall, strong, and moved with impressive athleticism. Perhaps it was the cream and gold cloak he wore, or perhaps the sunshine or his blonde hair, but he seemed almost to emit his own light. At least he did to me. However, I also remembered the other rumours about him. Society talked endlessly about the possibility that he was a womanizer, that he had a mercurial personality, and that he revelled in backstabbing people. There was even a rumour that it wasn't the king of the Celestial Isles was incapable of having children, but that the prince had killed each of them to ensure his own ascendance to the throne. But as the prince came to a halt before me, one thing was certain. He was incredibly handsome. His blonde hair fell into soft, tousled waves about his face, and his full lips curved into a knowing smile. He bore a strong neck and broad shoulders, but what was most striking about him were his eyes, the colour of which seemed to shift as I looked into their depths. Prince Henry, I greeted with a small curtsy. I am Queen Bronwyn. Welcome to the kingdom of Elisaria. I hadn't expected it, but instead of speaking or bowing, Henry took my hand, bent upon one knee before me like a knight swearing a vow of loyalty, and placed a delicate kiss on my fingers. I had knighted many men, and many had sworn fealty to me, but there was one significant difference between them and him. The knights never failed to lower their eyes as they kissed me, while this man held my gaze captive. My breath hitched in my throat as his lips grazed my skin.
It's an honor to meet you, Majesty.
I fought to regain my composure, forcing my expression into one of dignity, born through years of training. It's an honor to meet you as well, Prince Henry. He smiled softly, and releasing my hand, rose to his full height once more. He was very tall. You must have had a difficult journey. I hope you will rest and enjoy my realm until the solstice.
I've heard nothing but good things about the imperial palace of Elisaria. I see now that it is indeed very beautiful.
I hope you will find it pleasing. The prince's eyes squinted into a smile, and I couldn't help but think that his next words had nothing to do with the architecture.
I am already pleased.
Signing my name with a flourish on the scroll destined to be made into law, I looked up at the nearest secretary. Is that the last of it for today?
Well, yes, my lady, but we could do to look over the itinerary for...
But I didn't let him finish. I was eager to leave my work, for today was the day that Lady Laura was set to return. Pushing myself out of my seat, I picked up my skirts and fought the urge to run back to the Western Palace. I found her waiting for me in my chambers, surrounded by the rest of my ladies. Rushing to her, I quickly gathered her into an embrace. Laura, I whispered into her hair, before stepping back to take in the sight of her. I'm so glad to see you. How are you feeling? You haven't come back too soon, have you? There's no need to rush your return. You are kind, Your Highness, but I'm eager to return to work. The idleness was beginning to wear thin, and regardless, I didn't want to miss out on the festive season. I do know how much you love it, Laura, and I will do my best to ensure your special enjoyment of it this year. Though she still looked more pale than I would have liked, Laura's lips nonetheless curved into her characteristic mischievous smile. Speaking of the beginning of the festivities, I hear a certain guest has arrived. Do tell, how was Prince Henry? Is he as beautiful as the rumors make him out to be? At the mere mention of the prince, my breath hitched. In truth, he hadn't left my mind since our meeting upon the palace steps, and I could still feel the touch of his lips upon my hand. And when I tried to shake myself off from such a foolish infatuation, his hold over me only seemed to tighten. When I spoke, my voice came out as a whisper. He was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. My ladies-in-waiting had drawn close in anticipation of my answer, teacups in hand, and at my statement, they let out a collective squeal. What about his voice? His face? And his body? As queen, I tried to remain dignified at all times, but even I fell prey to this enjoyable descent into girlish excitement. His voice, deep. His face, proud. His body, well, the marble statues in the gardens don't hold a flame to him. The squeals doubled this time, compounded by hands over hearts, and exaggerated swooning. I giggled along with my ladies, who of course could not wait to see Prince Henry for themselves, but were also undoubtedly looking forward to the drama he was sure to bring to the festive season. With the scandalous rumours that seemed to follow him, he was sure to. Our chatter and gossip continued well past sunset, as the ladies helped me to dress in a beautiful evening gown the colour of red wine, and we would have continued in the same way, if not for an insistent tapping upon the window. It was Majesty, rapping upon the thin pane of glass with his beak. Quick, Lady Laura, open the window and fetch the bird some water. Pulling away from my ladies, who were whispering about the bird's curious new name, I rushed to meet the midnight hawk upon the windowsill. Majesty immediately held out his foot, evidently eager to deliver the latest note. I took the parchment to my desk and unfurled the message.
I have arrived at the Imperial Palace. Do you know who I am?
He was already here, my secret correspondent. Mentally, I scanned through all the faces I had greeted earlier, but nothing stood out to me. It was difficult to pinpoint one person from the abundance of guests. There was the Grand Duke Cromwell and his wife, the Grand Duke Lavilla, the Chancellor and his family from the Northern Kingdom, the children of the Duchess Cranthea from Samano, Prince Henry, of course, King Cyril of Boheme. The problem was that they came in twos and threes, often chatting amongst themselves and usually surrounded by knights, servants, and escorts. I didn't even know if these notes came from a man or a woman, if the writer was young or old, or what rank in society they held. It was almost impossible to determine Majesty's owner without further clues. I took up my quill. I do not know who you are. I considered carefully for a moment longer, and then added, Do you truly know who I am? I was certain they didn't know, and that the first note, the one that still made me blush, had been a fluke. I was one of countless people living in the palace, and Majesty's master couldn't be sure to whom the bird was delivering his letters. As soon as the hawk saw me rolling the little parchment once more, he hopped to my side. "This little bird is quite clever, Your Majesty. He does seem to be quite devoted to me," I mused, but once again tried to shake off that unnerving feeling of what? Enchantment? Don't be so foolish, Bronwyn. Magic hasn't been seen in these parts for generations. Having tied the note to the bird's leg, I stroked his head once again, and was rewarded with a sort of purring little chirp. "All right, Majesty, it's time to fly once more. Can you take my note back to your master?" Opening his half-closed eyes, the hawk stretched his wings, flapped mightily, scattering the papers on my desk, and leapt out of the window at my command. I was already sorry to see him go. Countess Eliza came to my side as I stared silently out the window after him. "Do you like birds, Your Majesty?" "Yes, well enough, Eliza. But this one is—" "Never mind what it is or isn't." The Countess smiled at me, but was wise enough to say no more, with a blush upon my cheeks. "You are being a fool, Bronwyn." I thought it best to change the subject. "I haven't seen Viscountess Verdi since yesterday. Do you know where she's gone?" "My lady, she had to rush back to her estate. Troubles again." The ladies-in-waiting glanced at each other. Unlike the rest of them, Viscountess Verdi had no mansion in the capital, and she frequently had to return to her estate in the country due to personal matters. Finally, Eliza spoke. "It's her son, gaming again. And of course the Viscount is of no help. She found him in bed with a commoner last week. Apparently the woman's husband is seeking retribution." I felt terrible for Viscountess Verdi. I was worried, but I couldn't interfere without her asking me for help, else I would risk wounding her pride. Every noble family had their problems, but there was something about the Verdis that seemed particularly desperate. I hoped that I wouldn't come to regret keeping her in my employ.
"Prince Henry wants to see you."
I looked up in surprise at Sir Artemis, who made the announcement. "Prince Henry?"
"Yes, Your Majesty. He seems to have a certain request for you. And only you."
Despite the pleasant tightening in my stomach, I glanced at the mountains of paperwork in front of me. I really didn't have time for this, but I had to admit that my curiosity had been piqued. Nodding at the knight, I left my office to find the prince in the corridor just outside, studying an ancient tapestry, affording me a moment to study him. He was a tall and handsome man, with hair the colour of beaten gold, but more than that, his presence was imposing. Beyond the breadth of his shoulders or his height, his being seemed to fill the cavernous space in which we stood, and it drew me towards him. He must have felt my gaze upon him, for Henry suddenly turned and kneeled before me once again. I knew he awaited my acknowledgement, but I needed a moment to calm the beating of my heart. "You are very kind to kneel, Prince Henry," I said with a smile, hoping that the tremble I felt in my body wasn't evident in my voice, but courtesy only demands a small bow.
"I hope you don't think me rude, Your Highness. I just meant to show my respect."
"Not at all. I'm simply worried for your knee on these hard marble floors. We are sure to cross paths often over the course of the festivities, and I wouldn't want you to get an ache." A crooked but charming smile broke across the prince's face as I spoke. Whatever thought had crossed his mind, I felt best to cut off. "Now, Prince Henry, what can I do for you?"
"I was told you would be finished with the day's duties around this time. Have I been misinformed?"
He had asked someone about my working hours. My suspicions were immediately raised, and I was sure I could feel Sir Artemis tense behind me. Was this impropriety, or something more ominous? The prince was correct, though, and obviously surmised as much when I failed to come up with a timely excuse.
"Wonderful. My lady, I was hoping that you could show me the palace. I would like to familiarize myself with it, but my sense of direction is sadly lacking, and I'm afraid that I will get lost."
"Prince Henry, such a request is a little unusual, and I have a great deal of work to do. Perhaps I could send for one of the footmen, Or perhaps Artemis here.
You.
I'm sorry?
I wish for the Majesty to show me.
I had to stop myself from taking a step back. He had called me the Majesty, not your Majesty. Was this a simple failure of language between our two realms, or... The word hung in the air with a certain importance to it, all because I had been sending messages with Majesty the bird. Did that mean Prince Henry was Majesty's master? Did he think I was his secret correspondent? Was that first note about the burning of his soul? I quickly shook the thought from my mind. Don't be foolish, Bronwyn, there are thousands of guests here. He just made a silly blunder with a royal title. Prince Henry watched me carefully, eyes dancing across my features, awaiting my response. Sir Artemis, ever present, frowned. He likely thought that it was rude for the prince to have made such a request of me. However, letters or otherwise, I couldn't risk a political blunder. The prince had asked me for my time, and declining him seemed unwise, as there was no knowing when his kingdom would surpass Elisaria in might and influence. And they had been our greatest enemy. I certainly wasn't going to cause unnecessary trouble by denying the prince, who might very well succeed to the throne one day. And if the guise of politics allowed me to spend time with this handsome stranger, then so be it. No one would be the wiser. All right, let me get my cloak. The day was dark, with curtains of silvery rain hanging heavy on the horizon. But Prince Henry still seemed intent on his tour. And if I was being truthful, not much would have dissuaded me either. Have you seen the Silver Gardens? I asked the prince, careful to keep a respectful distance from him as we strolled. I could feel Sir Artemis's gaze watching us closely from a few paces behind. Or, more to the point, watching Henry closely, wary of any threats to his queen. I kept my tone light, both for the prince's benefit and to signal to Artemis that I was safe. That garden is the closest to the Imperial Palace, and very few foreigners have been allowed to see it due to its proximity to a political centre. I could take you... But I didn't get the chance to finish speaking. The sole of my boot slipped on the dampened limestone courtyard, stealing my balance. I braced for a hard fall, but the ground never came. Instead, I felt two strong arms tight about my waist, expecting to see the leathery visage of the old knight, my protector, when I looked up. I found I was gazing into Prince Henry's eyes.
My lady, are you all right?
He was so close, mere inches from my face. And now that the sensation of my falling had ceased, I became aware of his hands on the small of my back and the curve of my hip. Most intimate places indeed, but I couldn't blame the man. He had reached for me out of need, and I had clung to him.
The lady appears to be fine now, Prince Henry.
Artemis. Glancing at the old knight, I could see the warning in his eyes, but also the shame of not getting to me first. As Henry also became aware of Artemis's veiled threat, he helped me back to my feet. Smoothing my skirts, I gave him a small nod. Thank you, my lord. I'm quite well now.
Of course.
As I stepped back from him, trying to re-establish an appropriate distance between us, I thought I saw the shadow of some darker emotion cross Henry's face, but he was quick to disguise whatever it was with charm.
Perhaps Majesty would like to stroll the corridors of the palace instead.
I glanced at the horizon. The weather still threatened rain, but in my mind, the palace walls posed the bigger menace. Prying eyes, open ears, and loose lips. My choice was simple. Either call off this tour with the prince entirely, or brave the elements. I turned to Henry and smiled. But you haven't yet seen the Silver Gardens. He looked at me, assessing. Then he grinned.
Indeed, I haven't. However, I insist on taking your arm. I'll not be blamed for war between our two nations because I let the Queen slip through my fingers.
As I smiled, Henry gallantly offered me his elbow as we descended the long limestone steps away from the palace. And though I was perfectly capable of traversing those stairs myself on any other day, I couldn't deny that I wanted to feel his arm beneath my fingertips. The sensation did not disappoint. With Sir Artemis trailing behind us, hand on the hilt of his sword no doubt, Henry and I walked the circuit of the gardens. I took great pleasure in pointing out the different flora that I had chosen, or that had been gifted to our kingdom from a foreign dignitary. I enjoyed it because Henry seemed also to appreciate my stories and knowledge of the herbs and land. While we strolled, I couldn't help but steal glimpses at him. His expression was a strange mix, and not one easily interpreted, especially on a face as handsome as his. I'm ashamed to say, Prince Henry, that I don't believe we have any flora from the Celestial Isles. Perhaps you could— But I was interrupted. Your Majesty! We both turned to find a young woman rushing toward us, shouting from across the expanse of the great lawn. It was Rose. Your Majesty, wait! I'll walk with you! Anger flared within me. Despite my best efforts to avoid her, the damned concubine still sought me out. There was no way I was willing to promenade through the gardens with Rose, whether Prince Henry and Artemis were there to act as a buffer or not. Regardless of my own personal reasons, I couldn't have anyone seeing the Queen and the concubine taking a stroll with a neighbouring country's prince and rumoured heir. The gossip mongers would just love that. I racked my mind for a reasonable excuse, but I found I didn't have any. Rose was going to get her way once again. I was sure that Prince Henry felt the tension string through my body, for he seemed to hold me tighter to him. But before he could ask me if I was all right, I turned to him. Run.
Run?
With his brow furrowed in question and Rose bearing down on us, I quickly turned to Artemis and whispered, hushed and mischievous, It is time to fulfill your oath to me, good knight. Save me from this witch while I escape. With that, I pulled hard on Henry's arm. He didn't need much encouragement to follow me, and we dashed along a long line of emerald cedars, grinning as we went, thrilled by the escape and the foolishness of it all. Evergreens and holly blurred past us as we ran, gasping and giggling around the hedgerows, like children, until Henry tugged on my arm and pulled me aside and out of sight, behind a tall row of laurel. Pressing ourselves into the greenery, winded and spent, we gasped for breath, grinning at each other. Did we lose her? In order to peer around the hedgerow, Henry placed a strong arm against the foliage, palm near my ear, and leaned across my body to look. He was careful not to touch me, but I could feel the heat of him, the proximity making me aware of every inch of him. It took all my control not to reach out and place my hand on his chest.
She's gone. That old knight of yours has done his duty admirably. It appears he's leading the woman back to the palace. I haven't seen a grizzled old warrior like that since the wars. Where did he come from?
Artemis has been with me for as long as I can remember. From the moment I was pledged to be the future king's wife, he's been tasked with protecting me.
And when was that?
I was just a child.
So, Aldrich has always been destined for you, and you to him.
Until recently. Until her. Henry turned back to me then, and it was plain from the expression on his face that he too had become suddenly aware of every inch of me, of our closeness. His gaze drifted to my lips, then quickly away. Neither one of us spoke, but the silence between us was thick with expectation. Commoners would have kissed without a second thought, but we were royals. Henry shook his head and looked away.
Do you not find me handsome?
My goodness, what a question.
It's a question I need answering, for by now most people, especially women, will do just about anything for me. Is my face swollen today? I made sure to dress finely, and yet Majesty remains cold.
I must have heard him wrong. With my mouth surely agape, I stopped and stared at him. Did he say this in jest? So blatant, so rude. Suddenly, Prince Henry stopped fiddling with his cravat and burst out laughing.
My apologies, Majesty, but I needed to lighten the mood. That run-in with that woman soured you terribly, and I just couldn't bear to see the frown on your face any longer. I just wanted to make you laugh.
Oh, I exclaimed, both relieved and now fighting a fit of giggles. Goodness, you had me worried. You aren't incorrect, however. That woman makes me seethe. Seeing his success and making me smile, Henry glanced around the hedgerow once more, then offered me his arm again.
Shall we? It appears that the coast is clear.
Taking up each other's arms again, we continued our stroll, this time very much alone.
So, that woman, I suppose she is the king's rumoured mistress?
I noticed that the prince used the term mistress instead of concubine. This, too, was not typical of nobility, but it was a more accurate representation of Rose's status, and he obviously made the unflattering distinction for my benefit. I couldn't help but smile again. Seeing that his attempts at brightening my spirit were working, Henry continued speaking.
The king is a strange man. How could he look elsewhere for other women when the queen stands in front of him?
I turned my face away from him. It is a question I too have been asking myself of late.
It is a question you deserve an answer to, my lady.
Thank you for your kind words, Prince Henry.
There is no need to thank me. If he cannot appreciate you, then he is a fool who does not deserve you.
He speaks so plainly. My first instinct was to be flattered, but then the rumours about his character came suddenly into my mind. Womanizer, manipulator, murderer. I glanced at Henry sidelong, and he suddenly looked like the type who only gave out compliments when it suited him, and helped him to achieve his own ends. I dropped my hold on his arm.
Majesty.
I must return to my duties. I thank you for the stroll, Prince Henry. Enjoy the rest of your time in Elysaria. It is doubtful that we will see each other again. But as I strode away, he called after me.
Majesty, would you grant me an invitation to the royal banquet on the last day of the winter solstice celebrations? As your guest.
Once again, Prince Henry surprised me. Those present at the final solstice banquet were distinguished individuals of either high status or great achievement. It was a small and almost intimate affair, as far as royal occasions went. Why?
Isn't it obvious?
I blushed. Bronwyn, you fool. A moment of dalliance in the gardens, the mention of a concubine, and now every foreign dignitary thinks you're desperate and available to bed. I rounded on Henry, red-faced and angry. I am not that kind of woman, Prince, nor that kind of queen. I am
one to negotiate diplomatic affairs at the most important political event on Elisaria's calendar. I only meant to strengthen ties between our two great nations. Trade, security, those sorts of obvious topics. Majesty, what did you suppose was so obvious?
His tone was so even, so matter-of-fact, that I felt the fool for even having imagined there was anything between us. Embarrassment flared within me. Dear Lord, Bronwyn, has Aldrich stolen your sense from you as well? I lifted my chin and levelled my gaze at the prince. Your invitation will be delivered to you shortly. Turning on my heel, I strode away, eager to be back within the palace walls. But as I retreated from the gardens, farther and farther away from Henry, I couldn't help but feel that I had somehow made a deal with the devil. The next day brought more guests to the palace, and the time passed quickly as I exchanged greetings with them, all while solving innumerable little problems that popped up here and there concerning the final preparations for the solstice. Maybe it was because of the rain, but the day felt particularly hectic. It wasn't until I retired to my chambers in the evening that I had a moment to catch my breath, but even that was short-lived, as I found Majesty sitting on the windowsill, soaking wet and shuddering. I threw open the sash. My goodness, your master sent you in this rain. You poor thing, you're shaking. I gathered Majesty up in my arms, pushed the window closed, and carefully laid the heavy bird on the settee. I was dismayed to find him soaking to the skin and shivering from the cold. Muttering as I worked, I wrapped a soft towel around his body and gently dried each and every one of his feathers. Majesty stiffened as I began, likely uncomfortable with being handled by a veritable stranger, but soon he was dozing in my hands as I fussed about him. Only when the nighthawk was completely dry and soundly sleeping did I carefully pull the latest note from his leg. The handwriting was smudged by the rain, but thankfully still legible.
Then shall we make a bet? The one who finds the other wins.
What was it that I had written before? Ah, yes. I had asked the sender who they were. A bet, I went to the desk to write my reply. What would you bet on? I wondered what the response would be. In truth, I was shamefully excited to find out, and I was eager to send my note onwards. However, the rain still lashed heavily against the windows, and it didn't look like it would be letting up any time soon. It would be cruel to send Majesty out in such weather. What if he got hurt or sick? I would feel terrible. Suddenly, I felt as if I was being watched, and when I looked up, I found Majesty looking at me with such intent that I half expected him to speak. When I put my quill down, he shouldered off the towel and flew the short distance to my desk, perching on the heavy oak frame. Then he extended his leg. No. He tilted his head to the side, clearly confused. You see the rain? I'm not sending you out in that. Slowly, Majesty lowered his leg, though he still eyed me with suspicion. You can sleep here tonight, with me. Majesty squawked. Oh, you silly thing. Is this because I'm a girl and you're a boy? Well, don't worry, I won't peek. I said it in jest, but somehow I became more aware of the fact and made sure to undress out of sight. After my bath, I slipped into a silk dressing gown and returned to my room. I found Majesty lying on my bed, fast asleep. I had planned to make a nest of cushions for him so he could doze comfortably next to me, but he was already flat on his back, and to my amusement, snoring ever so slightly. Could birds sleep on their back like that? Evidently they could. Taking my chances, I tiptoed closer and slowly crawled into bed next to Majesty, careful not to make too much movement. Laying my head on the pillow, I kept still, amazed by the warmth emanating from his body, and I took the opportunity to study him. Majesty's feathers were so finely detailed that they appeared iridescent in the low candlelight of my room, but when I peered too closely, I felt as though the image of them shifted in my vision. I must be overtired. Rubbing at my eyes to clear them, I blinked hard and studied the bird's feathers again, to prove to myself how silly I was being. But again the image danced. I felt as though I was looking at a reflection in a pond, and someone had disturbed the water. Bronwyn, you're being foolish now. Leave it be and go to bed. I couldn't help it. I reached out my hand, slowly extending my fingers towards the bird. Before, when drying him, I had only touched his feathers through the towel, but now I felt it important to somehow prove that the feathers were indeed there. Slowly, carefully, I bridged the space between us, extending the tips of my fingers to the fine array, and when I touched them, I found feathers, plain and simple. Bronwyn, you fool. Mad at myself for entertaining such whimsies, I rolled over and pushed the covers up to my chin. However, as my eyes became heavy with sleep, I was certain I could feel a strange sensation upon my fingertips where I had touched the midnight hawk. I had only felt such a sensation a handful of times before, but it couldn't be. Could it? Could it be magic?
It was well past midnight, and rain still lashed at the castle walls, chilling the air within. But Aldrich stalked the echoing corridors of the palace nonetheless. Sleep evaded him, and the stillness of his chambers haunted him, Though insomnolence had never troubled him quite so badly before, when a night like this had descended upon him in the past, he would seek Bronwyn's company. Sometimes they made love, but others they simply talked. About everything, about nothing. But inevitably, his mind would be soothed by daybreak. Aldrich had tried as much earlier with Rose, and though she had slaked his lust, his mind remained troubled.
"Your Highness, there you are."
Aldrich whirled to find Baron Lant ambling down the corridor towards him. The king swore quietly under his breath. "What is it, Baron?"
"Sire, I've been looking for you all evening."
"Can't whatever this is wait until morning? I'm in no mood for decisions."
"I wish it could, sire, but with the solstice approaching—"
"Very well." Aldrich leaned against one of the stone window sills of the corridor, crossing his arms over his chest. "What is it?"
"A few items of business, sire. First, you will be attending the royal ball with Queen Bronwyn, I assume?"
"Don't try my patience, Baron."
"Yes, sire, the Queen it is. I'll be sure to coordinate with her maids regarding your attire."
"Baron, tell me you didn't hunt me down in the middle of the night to discuss fashion."
"Not only fashion, sire, though a visual show of unity is always significant."
Under Aldrich's withering stare, Baron Lant cleared his throat.
"I have also prepared your speeches for the events. Please tell me if you require any changes."
Aldrich accepted the leather folio the Baron held out to him, but didn't bother to look within. "Is that all, Baron? My patience is wearing thin."
"One more thing, sire. It is customary for the king and queen to mark the occasion with special announcements, weddings, coronations, inductees into the order."
"What of it?"
"Is there any forthcoming, joyous event that I should prepare the servants for?"
"Speak plainly, Baron. What is it you want me to say?"
"It's the ministers, sire. You see, you and the Queen have been married for several years now."
"And?"
It's the issue of succession, sire. They are beginning to fret about the future of the line, and the future of the kingdom."
Aldrich dropped his gaze, both from shame and worry, but also from anger. He remained silent for so long that the Baron shifted on his feet, uncomfortable.
"Sire, am I to take it that there is no heir on the way?"
In a movement so quick as to be nearly violent, Aldrich pushed himself away from the stone and strode away from Lant, growling over his shoulder, "Don't you see the lengths I'm going to secure such a line?"
I woke the next morning to find Majesty gone. Pushing myself up on my elbows, I saw that the window was slightly ajar. He must have let himself out. What an intelligent creature. Even more impressive was that I found he remembered to take the note from my desk. How on earth did he tie it to his leg? Perhaps he kept hold of it in his beak, I thought, as I pushed myself from the bed. But as I was tying my dressing gown around my waist, I couldn't help but wonder at a certain fragrance that lingered in my room, the unmistakable scent of a man. Later, as my maids dressed me, a velvet gown the colour of ripe plums, they could tell I was distracted, and perhaps I was, for I couldn't get Majesty out of my mind. It was silly to be so taken by a bird, but I was certain that since the Midnight Hawk was so intelligent, his owner had to be as well. Perhaps it was Emperor Cirium of Boheme. He was known for his wit and quick thinking. Also, Boheme was a maritime country, and often used birds to send messages to neighbouring continents. One thing was for certain. They were certain to be better than that impertinent Prince Henry. "You look brighter today, Your Majesty," Countess Eliza commented, interrupting my train of thought. "Is that so?" "Why, yes. I've been worried about your dark moods, but I'm glad the winter solstice celebrations have cheered you." Countess Eliza was no fool, and she knew me better than I cared to admit. She knew very well that it wasn't the festivities that cheered me. She and the other ladies had heard rumour of my stroll with Henry in the gardens, and I knew it. The women glanced sidelong at each other, waiting to see if I would amend her statement, but I wasn't about to admit otherwise. Instead, I gave them a small smile, checked my appearance in the mirror, and made for the Imperial Palace. My work that day was made easier by my light heart, and soon enough the bell rang for luncheon. Typically, I would have taken my meal in the Imperial Palace, so as not to waste time during my day, but Majesty had never visited me there, and so I made my excuses to return to my apartments. "Majesty," I exclaimed as I found him once again, sitting outside on the windowsill. Fortunately, the weather was clear, and he was contentedly half dozing in the sunshine, instead of shivering in the rain. The sound of the window opening woke him, and he eagerly flew into the room and held out his leg, apparently eager for me to read the day's note. Equally excited, I untied the parchment and read quickly, reveling in the now familiar handwriting.
"I'll bet Majesty."
Shocked, I looked up at the midnight hawk, but the bird only blinked his large eyes and tilted his head, oblivious to the contents of the letter. "Your master is wagering you for our bet." Of course he didn't understand. I took a few unsure steps away from the bird and sat at my desk. I wanted to have Majesty. I was desperate for him. I had never met such a beautiful and intelligent creature before, and not only that, but he made me feel safer and more confident than any human I had ever known. But I couldn't take him. For one thing, Majesty would never understand. The poor thing would think he'd been abandoned by his master. Surely the determination with which he delivered his messages on his master's behalf was indicative of his loyalty to him. No, I couldn't take Majesty under any circumstances. And there was something else. I was becoming less and less happy with the bet anyway. It was curious, of course. Part of me wanted to know with whom I conversed, but worry stalked me. I felt that the reason Majesty's owner and I could send messages back and forth to each other at all was because we were strangers. I doubted very much we would be able to talk in this familiar way after we had revealed our identities to one another. Royal protocol certainly wouldn't allow it, no matter who my secret correspondent was. Above all, I had to be careful to preserve my dignity of my role as queen. The bird shifted before me, bringing my focus back to the room. He seemed impatient for me to start writing. Hesitantly, I pulled out a piece of parchment and quill and wrote a lie. "All right. If we're playing a game, then you'll need a clue as to my identity. Here's your first hint. I'm a man." There, I thought to myself. Now my correspondent won't be able to find me, and that way we can remain friends, just as we were right now. As I rolled my reply and tied it with silk ribbon to Majesty's leg once more, I realized something. Majesty and my secret correspondent were the only things holding me together during this entire situation with the king and the concubine. It was the day before the solstice celebrations officially began, which meant that I was exceedingly busy. I greeted the last-minute arrivals, checked that their lodgings were sufficient, consulted with the chiefs about endless menus, and oversaw any and all remaining hiccups for the forthcoming festivities. With such commotion around me, I hardly had a moment to myself, but I still made time to race back to the Western Palace over luncheon to see if Majesty was waiting for me today. But I was left disappointed. However, I did find someone in my rooms, though it was someone I did not expect. "Viscountess Verdi, I didn't know you had returned. Has it been a week since we saw each other last?" The Viscountess spun around when I spoke, apparently surprised to see me. I thought she looked pale and drawn, which distressed me. And what had she been doing by my desk? I haven't returned for long, Your Majesty. In fact, I am glad I have caught you alone, for I need to ask a favor of you." All right. May I borrow some money? Her face flamed red the moment the words left her mouth. I quickly averted my eyes so as not to embarrass her further, but it was highly unusual for anyone on the Queen's staff to ask for coin, let alone one of her own ladies-in-waiting. How much do you need? Approximately 5,000 crowns, Your Majesty. That was a fortune. I had known that her son and husband were in difficulties, but only now did I understand the extent of it. Viscountess Verdi, you have served me well for many years, and have always impressed me with your loyalty and honesty. You shall have the coin you require, no questions asked. But as the Viscountess bent into a deep curtsy before me, I couldn't ignore the sudden feeling of dread that washed over me. Countess Eliza was helping me to change my dress when she suddenly gasped. What's wrong? Worried, I spun around, but found her looking out the window. Majesty was sitting on the sill. Countess Eliza tisked. I saw him land on the casement, Your Majesty, but the cheeky thing showed no shame. He looked right at you as I pulled your dress on. Oh, Eliza, you're just imagining things. He's just a bird. Now please, button me up so I can let him in. I'm telling you, Your Majesty, bird or not, he's a typical man. Eliza had always been fanciful, and I thought nothing more of it while she finished with the long run of pearl buttons up the back of my gown. However, even when I approached, Majesty kept his gaze firmly on me, and couldn't seem to shake the sensation that I was being studied. I looked over my shoulder at Eliza, who mouthed the words, typical man. With a sigh, I opened the window. Majesty, my sweet bird, you look tired. Has your master been overworking you? I hope not on my account. Come in, we'll fetch you some water. I sent Eliza for a pitcher, and would have been more than happy to let Majesty rest a while before looking at the note, but the bird was insistent. I gave him a grateful stroke down his back, again feeling that strange tingling sensation in my fingertips after making contact with his feathers, then pulled the strip of parchment from his leg.
A lady who lies. My, our little game is becoming dangerous.
How did they? Of course, Bronwyn, you fool. The writer had revealed that they knew me, somehow, in their first note, the one that spoke of a burning of the soul. Blushing both at the memory and at my feeble attempt at deception, I took up a quill and replied, A lady's heart and mind are full of secrets. Are you certain that this is a dangerous game that you want to play? Finally, the winter solstice celebrations began. I loved the festive season. It was so magical and joyous, with so much good food and drink, and so many friendly faces and high spirits. Fireworks would glitter in the sky at night, and people would laugh together in the streets by day. I flung the covers off myself and sprung from the bed. Padding over to the window, I pushed open the sash and breathed in the cool of the morning air. It never got particularly cold in Elisaria, but sometimes we saw a dusting of snow, and perhaps today would be one of those days. I rang the silver bell beside my bed, and after a moment, Countess Eliza entered, dressed more extravagantly than usual. You look lovely, Eliza. Thank you, my lady. 'Tis the season, after all. I've chosen something quite special for you to wear today as well. The Countess smiled at me, then pulled the dress she had prepared for me from the wardrobe. My mother had given me the gown as a gift, a beautiful thing adorned with white sea pearls and overlaid with layers of snowy lace down the skirt. My mother hadn't said anything directly to me about the generous gift, but I knew she was worried about me, and the king, after the rumours about Rose. Eliza held out the dress for me to study. It's the first day of the festivities, Your Highness, so we must all look our best. For an event like this, my queen should stand out without being overwhelmed. The concept for this gown is the Queen of Snow. Seems appropriate, wouldn't you say, Your Majesty? The dress was breathtaking, and I could have gazed at it for hours, but Eliza urged me to get moving and wash up. After warming in a lavender-scented bath, Countess Eliza styled my hair into an elaborate chignon, then delicately applied my makeup. Once I had been fastened into the dress, she added more pearls to my hair and helped me slip into a pair of white satin heels. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I really believed that I came from a country of snow. "You look ethereal, Your Majesty. Thanks to all your hard work and dedication to me, Eliza. The king will be impressed when he sees you." I whipped around to face her. If it had been any other aide, I would have scolded them for such impertinence. But I relaxed and simply smiled when I remembered that Eliza meant me no harm. He would do well to remember to spare me a glance. Straightening one final wisp of hair, I left the mirror and checked the schedule on my desk one final time. From the second day onwards, it wouldn't matter. But on the first day of the celebrations, it was required that the king and queen enter the grand banquet together. I hoped that I would have the strength to hold Aldrich's hand and keep a convincing smile on my face. I found Aldrich waiting for me in the antechamber just outside of the throne room in the imperial palace. He stood as I approached and gave me a gentle smile, while he extended his hand for me to take. I hesitated before reaching out to him, for after all our years together acting as one, I suddenly didn't recognize the man before me. I wondered what was going on in his mind. Did he wish that he could enter the banquet with Rose on his arm? Was he as determined to perform his royal duties as I was? I was pleased to see that he seemed to be in full control of his emotions today. That was something at least. And a good thing, too, because all eyes would be on us, and it wouldn't do to start any further gossip. And so, I too put a smile on my face and reached for his hand. However, the moment we touched, the feel of his fingertips sent a thrill through my body. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me. I hoped he couldn't see the effect that he still had on me.
Bronwyn?
I couldn't look at him. If I did, I wasn't sure I could trust myself.
Bronwyn?
I heard you, Aldrich, what do you want? But he didn't answer. I forgot myself and looked up into his face, only to see the shadow of pain darkening his features. Did he still love me? He quickly regained control of his emotions, the shadow disappearing, but he gripped my hand tighter.
Are you ready to face the hordes?
As long as the Grand Duke Lavilla stays away from the brandy, I'm sure I'll be fine. Aldrich grinned, knowing of my dislike for the Grand Duke, and turned towards the great doors. The doors were shut tight against our arrival, and 4 guards, dressed in splendid imperial uniforms, stood on each side. As Aldrich and I came into view, the guards snapped to attention, and an official played the royal anthem on a silver trumpet. 2 page boys swung the doors wide open, and the noise of the ball ahead of us subsided. Aldrich and I came to a stop at the top step of an enormous staircase that stretched downwards and out into the gilded throne room. Even more glorious than usual, the room boasted festive decorations, flowing mead, the imperial orchestra, and hundreds of guests decked out in their national finery. After gazing upon the scene below, Aldrich raised his hand, and everyone bowed in response. This sight never failed to inspire me. Seeing my subjects celebrating along with all my political acquaintances always made me smile. However, this year, something was wrong. Rose. She stood in the very center of a ballroom, surrounded by a host of foreign nobles. I struggled to keep the smile upon my face, but my tongue had turned to ash, and I found it difficult to breathe. Calling upon my greatest skills as a queen, outwardly I kept my composure, but inwardly my mind whirled. Had Aldrich invited the concubine to the solstice ball? She isn't supposed to be here. She isn't supposed to be seen anywhere in high society, let alone at the most exclusive and important ball of the year. It wasn't that concubines were banned from the celebrations, but when they did attend, They usually had already been married off to a noble to achieve the minimum social status acceptable for such a gathering. Even if such an arrangement was a forced untruth, at least it hinted at some sort of respect for rules. But it wasn't just Rose's presence that made the world swim before me. It was that I now realized how far Aldrich was willing to go to break all rules and conventions on her behalf. I glanced sidelong at my husband, and immediately wished I hadn't. He and Rose had locked gazes, and their connection was made clear to me for the first time. I hadn't seen them together until now. My heart twisted. A hushed murmur spread through the crowd. Evidently, I wasn't the only one to notice the connection between the king and the concubine. Women covered their mouths with their fans, while men whispered to each other behind their gloves. Finally noticing the shift in atmosphere, Rose glanced around her, suddenly feeling the eyes of 100 guests upon her. Frightened, she looked at Aldrich. Without even a moment's hesitation, he turned to me and whispered in my ear,
"Bronwyn, can you go down alone?"
The two of us had already walked in together side by side, and technically his obligations with me were over. We could go down the stairs separately, but I did not want to give the impression that there was a rift between us. We go down together. Aldrich's expression smacked of shock. Never before had I spoken to him so bluntly, but I hardly cared for his feelings, or for the protocol of a royal wife any longer. Keeping my voice steady, I whispered back into his ear, "Many of the top foreign aristocrats are gathered here. We cannot let them think there is any division or weakness in our empire. We don't have to be a perfect couple, but we shouldn't look at each other unfavorably. If we don't walk down the stairs together, those countries who seek to take advantage of us will not let this opportunity go. I will not risk my country over your love affair." I had always been more deft with the ins and outs of politics than Aldrich had. It was something that had always irritated him, and I could see that familiar frustration in his expression now. But he also knew that I was right, and that this was no time to argue. With a heavy sigh, he offered me his arm again.
Together.
The king made quite the show of escorting me down the stairs, nodding to the crowd and showing me off, before stopping at a suitable area on the ground floor. He then dropped my arm and bowed to me, smiling. That was when he whispered through his teeth so that no one else but me could hear.
"Are you satisfied?"
Dropping into the customary curtsy, I hissed back, "If you leave now, you risk your entire kingdom." Aldrich hesitated for only a moment before answering.
"That's where you're wrong, Bronwyn. I'm doing this for the kingdom."
Without sparing me another moment, Aldrich made for Rose without looking back. I wasn't the only one who watched him go to her with outstretched arms, nor gasp aloud when he gathered her into his chest. My mind whirled. For our kingdom? I wrenched my gaze away from the sight. Grabbing a goblet of mead from a passing silver tray, I sought out the first familiar face in the crowd. "Duchess Betha, I hope you're enjoying your evening." "Of course, Your Majesty. You have organized the ball with uncommon skill as usual." I was thankful that the Duchess tactfully ignored the topic of Aldrich and Rose, and before long, other noble women and young ladies had come to join our conversation. Just as I was starting to relax, a new whisper rushed through the crowd. "Who is that?" one of the noble women asked me. I glanced over my shoulder, following the direction of her gaze. It was Prince Henry. My heart skipped a beat. Prince Henry stood under a grand stone archway along the perimeter of the throne room. With a cool eye, he surveyed the guests before him, and while his expression remained impassive, I wondered if he ever got used to the wildfire of whispers that broke out every time he made an appearance.
"They say that he is a womanizer."
I heard that he has to drink an elixir to keep his face looking so handsome.
He mixes with thieves and murderers.
The noble women in my circle were at least a little bit more realistic about their rumours of choice. How many women does he have on the go this time? I hear his ego is worse than a god's. Who could stand that? Maybe he'll be a bachelor forever. Maybe he's here looking for an advantageous match with a woman from Elisaria. Keeping my mouth shut, I feigned disinterest in the lady's gossip about the mysterious prince, instead busying myself with a goblet of mead. But more than that, I tried not to look in Prince Henry's direction, though the temptation to do so was immense. Of course I couldn't help myself, and every once in a while I risked a glance over my shoulder. For the most part, Henry was occupied in fending off the latest guest who came to talk to him. But when I peeked for a third time, our eyes met. The connection in our gaze sent a fizz of electricity across my skin and a blush on my cheeks. In response, Henry lifted his own goblet of mead to toast me from across the room, and then took a long drink. Well, would you look at that? Even the Queen cannot help but look at that face. The comment had come from somewhere behind me, and was followed by a round of mean-spirited giggles. Whirling around, I scanned the faces nearest to me. The comment hadn't come from my circle, but somewhere nearby. But there were so many people, many of whom I didn't know, as they hailed from countries all over the continent. My heart pounded. Rumours were one thing, but to be a laughingstock was something else entirely. Then another voice. Your Majesty, did you really give her a gift? Oh, what? My voice came out sharper than I had intended as I whipped back around to face the circle within which I stood. The lady who had spoken blushed and apologized. Inwardly, I cringed and chastised myself for unleashing even the slightest hint of my true emotions on one of my subjects. I'm sorry, I'm not angry, at least not with you, but I don't understand what you mean. A gift? For who? The lady opened her mouth to answer, albeit somewhat more hesitantly this time. The foreign guests seemed to be speaking of that woman, and nothing else, Your Highness. They're saying that she is the first concubine the king has accepted, and that you have bestowed upon her all manner of luxurious gifts in order to keep the king's favour. I already knew the first part, but how had the rumour suddenly turned into me giving her gifts? Have you heard anything else? I asked, nervously swirling the drink in my hand. Well, a foreigner asked that woman if she was satisfied coming between Your Majesty and the king himself, and apparently she said yes. She said that both the king and the queen love her greatly, and that immediately after she became a concubine, the queen sent her a precious gift to welcome her. I felt suddenly dizzy, and my knees jellied beneath me. People were laughing at me for sending gifts to my husband's lover so I could gain his attention. All the pride that I had mustered to walk into the ball, head held high, swiftly collapsed like a castle of sand. No matter how much I tried to distance myself from Aldrich and Rose, no matter how many times I stated that I didn't want to be involved, I was smothered by them. I clenched the stem of my goblet to give myself strength, but even so, my vision swam in front of me. I desperately wanted to run back to the Western Palace and scream into a pillow in the safety of my chambers. But rushing out and causing a scene would only make things worse. I smoothed the front of my skirts, then surveyed the guests before me with a confident gaze. Miss Rose must have misunderstood something, for I did not send her a gift of any kind. I do not need, nor want, her loyalty or love. The ladies nodded calmly, but I couldn't be certain whether they believed me or not. People tended to dismiss the excuses of those hurt by gossip. I didn't want to get involved, but now that it had come to this, there was nothing to be done except call on Rose myself and ask her about this damned gift later. I grabbed another goblet of mead from a passing tray and downed the entire draught in one gulp. It's time to dance, I stated, probably with more vigour than was strictly necessary, but the alcohol was doing its good work, and I didn't care. The ladies around me giggled nervously, but followed suit and placed their goblets on nearby tables and pedestals, and craned their necks to find their dance partners. There was one rule at the ball. One could not dance with the same partner twice in a row. This convention was ancient, and at times seemed archaic, but it encouraged one to dance with many people, under the guise of politics. That was often a wise strategy. However, the first dance was considered the most meaningful. I signalled to the musicians to prepare the opening waltz. Since our marriage, Aldrich had always taken his first turn across the floor with me. It wasn't a requirement, but he did so out of respect, and for a show of unity to our subjects and guests. Not that it was a chore for him. He usually couldn't keep his eyes, or his hands, off me during the festive season. The dancers just provided one more excuse for him to get close to me. This year, however, I had a sneaking suspicion who his partner would be. And sure enough, from the corner of my eye, I saw Aldrich reaching for Rose's hand from amongst the crush of guests who surrounded the king. To her credit, the concubine glanced in my direction, the words of apology seemingly on her lips. But when Aldrich followed her gaze, he gave no such consideration to me. Instead, his eyes felt cold upon me, as if he was trying to prove something. I quickly looked away, but kept my chin high as I strode across the throne room. The only person who could ask the Queen for the first dance was the king, since no one else could ask me to dance anyway, and in order to preserve what little dignity I had left, I thought it better to leave the room altogether. But before I could reach the exit, another rush of whispers caught up to me, and I felt a spot of white heat upon the nape of my neck. I was being watched. When I spun around to face this threat, I found Prince Henry close on my heels. He extended his hand to me.
Majesty, would you kindly do me the honour of this dance?
I was sure that my mouth fell open in surprise. Around us, the nearby nobles renewed their whispering with a greater fervour than ever before. I wanted to say yes, both to punish Aldrich and, if I was being honest, for my own selfish reasons, but I hesitated. I was already ensnared in a web of rumour with the king and the concubine. Dancing with the prince of a foreign land so ensnared in his own scurrilous rumours wouldn't help things, never mind bucking the conventions of the first dance. However, I suddenly found that I didn't care very much for convention any longer. I rested my green gaze upon the prince, and gave him my answer. Very well. Upon taking Prince Henry's hand, he smiled broadly and led me to the dance floor. Before taking up our positions, he whispered playfully into my ear.
If you step on my foot, I promise to ignore it.
How little you think of me, Prince Henry, for every queen is trained in the art of not stepping on foreign dignitaries' feet, unless they deserve it. He chuckled mischievously at my jest, then led me in a wide sweep of the dance floor, showing off for all to see. I could feel every eye upon us, but most especially Aldrich's. He glared at Prince Henry, as though he had stolen something of his. What a fool the king is, I thought. Did he really expect that he could discard me, and that I would simply be waiting for him to crawl back to me whenever it suited him? In a small show of defiance, I gave Aldrich a hard stare, and then placed my hands upon Henry's strong shoulders, ready to waltz.
Good,
Henry murmured into my ear. What do you mean?
The way you're looking at me. You didn't pay much attention to me yesterday. I made sure to dress finely for you.
That crooked smile broke across his face again the moment I realized he was teasing me once more. Before I could respond in kind, the music began, and we started our whirl around the floor, spinning to the sound of violins and flutes. The throne room had transformed into a kaleidoscope of colour, with the Duchess of Betha dancing with the young and handsome Viscount Landry, the Duke Lavilla and his wife, Laura and Lady Alice, and of course dancing amongst the other guests, Aldrich and Rose. Prince Henry must have noticed the change in my expression when we waltzed past them, for he pulled me in closer and whispered into my ear,
I know better than anyone else how easily rumors spread.
I glanced up at him in surprise. You know the story of me sending gifts to the concubine? He nodded, then, twirling me around, pulled me in close once more.
Don't give it another thought, Majesty. People will always talk. It's how they brighten their dull lives, by concerning themselves with the business of others.
As we continued to dance, I considered all the rumours I had heard about Prince Henry himself, and suddenly wondered if I was giving them too much credence. Without even thinking, I pulled myself close to him, so I could whisper back into his ear, I don't believe it either.
What?
The rumours about you.
Which ones?
He asked with a sly grin as we continued to dance, the music and the motion giving us a form of privacy. Don't make me say it.
Come now, I cannot pass up the opportunity to hear a queen speak of sordid topics.
I retract my statement. I believe at least one of the rumours.
Which one?
That you are very stubborn. Prince Henry burst into laughter.
Well then, perhaps the other rumours are true. Oh, how do you know I'm not a womanizer, that I don't fraternize with black-hearted pirates, or that I killed my infant nephews just so that I could secure my own reign over the Celestial Isles?
I hesitated before answering, staring into the fathomless depths of his eyes. I can see it in your face, Prince Henry. You may have secrets, but not those. Henry looked taken aback and stared at me as though I had discovered something about him. He struggled to form a response, but was saved by the music coming to an end, and instead busied himself with the customary bow to my curtsy. What had he been about to say? But I didn't get to ask my question, for suddenly Aldrich appeared in front of me.
My queen, this time you dance with me.
My queen? Before I had the chance to accept or decline the king, Prince Henry had disappeared into the crowd. With a sigh, I placed my hand in Aldrich's. I knew he was only asking because the rules dictated that he couldn't dance with Rose twice in a row. I wanted nothing more than to chase after Henry. But after the berating I had given Aldrich earlier about showing unity, I couldn't very well do that. But as the king led me to the middle of the dance floor, and we readied in our positions, I saw something out of the corner of my eye that I hadn't expected. Rose was asking Prince Henry to dance.
My apologies, Miss Rose, but I'm tired and must decline.
Prince Henry gave her a small smile, then turned away. But Rose wasn't willing to let him go so easily. I hardly believe that, sir. A man as big and strong as you, and you do not have the stamina to dance twice in a row. The prince certainly has a surprisingly weak constitution. Rose knew she was being impertinent. It was a ploy to wound Henry's ego and force him onto the dance floor with her.
Believe what you will, Miss Rose, but I am going to take a break and find some refreshment to recover my strength.
And what about after? Perhaps the next dance?
No, Miss Rose.
Henry began, but before he finished, he made sure to look over in my direction, ensuring that I heard his response.
There is someone I want to dance with again.
Inwardly, I smiled at Prince Henry's flat refusal. He had been determined to cut Rose off, a far different tactic from how most nobles would have acted in that situation. Most were far too concerned with the way things looked, and how they should be done, or how they've always been done. Prince Henry seemed to care for none of that, and I couldn't help but find his rebellious attitude entirely alluring. Besides, seeing Rose so disconcerted at having been rejected made me feel deliciously good. As she turned away from Henry, our gazes met, but she couldn't stand to look at me for long, and instead sought out Aldrich, her eyes shimmering with tears. The music was about to start, But when Rose rushed to the king, he raised his hand, signalling for the orchestra to wait. Rose then whispered into his ear, but I was close enough to overhear it. "Your Majesty, I have no one to dance with."
"Then you must take a break, my prey, for you cannot dance with me. No one can dance with the same person twice in a row."
Rose, unschooled in the management of her emotions, let out a tiny cry as the tears began to fall. And when the surrounding nobles chuckled at her overt display, she turned red-faced from embarrassment. However, if she had looked closely at them, as I did, she would have seen that the aristocrats muttered, not with disdain, but from a frustrating persistence of endearment. Rose was not a noble, and her behavior was rude to say the least. But to everyone graced by her presence, she was a fresh and pure novelty. Several of the nearby noblemen approached Rose, taken by her distress, and asked her to dance. But she replied to each one of them with a weak, "No thank you," then trudged towards the edge of the room. Aldrich stiffened in my arms. He wanted to go after her, and I was sure that if the music hadn't started at that moment, he would have. Despite the animosity between us, falling into rhythm together came easily. Aldrich and I were used to dancing with one another. As children, we had descended into hysteric fits of laughter in our dance lessons, as our instructor had tried to teach us all of the traditional steps. How many hours had we wasted complaining about how awkward it was to hold each other? Dancing with him now, I found myself yearning for our more innocent past. How stupid and naive I was to believe that Aldrich and I would be together for the rest of our lives. Even now, as the dance brought us closer together, I felt the great distance between us. Aldrich leaned slightly forward, so as to whisper in my ear.
"When you were dancing with Prince Henry earlier, what did you talk about?"
"Nothing in particular."
"Really?"
"Is that so hard to believe?"
"Bronwyn, you have heard the rumours about him, have you not?"
"Hearing rumours and believing them are two very different things, Aldrich."
Oh, Bronwyn, don't be so naive. He's a womanizer, which means he's an expert at being very charming and for saying just the right things to get what he wants. I thought you were smarter than to fall into his trap. Or his bed."
Aldrich's insult to my intelligence made me furious, but I certainly wondered if I had indeed been charmed, for Henry had known exactly what to say to make me feel better. Was it because he understood me like no one else ever had before? Or was it because he knew that saying those things would get him closer to what he wanted? I grew cold in Aldrich's arms, and risked a glance over my shoulder. I found Prince Henry standing near the refreshment table, drink in hand, watching me. He gave me a warm smile when our eyes met. Unfortunately, Aldrich noticed where my attention had gone, and so continued uttering his threats.
"I have Rose as my concubine, so I won't tell you that you cannot take another man as your lover as well. But still, I must warn you against Prince Henry."
"I don't know what you're talking about."
"If you are with Prince Henry, he will not be your concubine. You will be his."
"How dare you?"
"Can you imagine the disgrace that would bring to the Queen of the Elasaria?"
I tried my best to regain my composure, but I nonetheless had to deliver my response through gritted teeth. "I don't know what you're imagining, but Prince Henry and I don't have that kind of relationship. We've only known each other for a few days. I cannot even say what we have is anything more than an acquaintance."
"Please, I only knew Rose for a few days, and look where we are now."
I was about to unleash a torrent of fury upon Aldrich, but he suddenly came to a halt. The music hadn't yet stopped, but he stood frozen on the floor, sending me stumbling into his chest as I was forced to stop as well. One of the nearer nobles leaned in, worry written across his face.
Your Majesty?
Without answering, and without so much as a glance at me, Aldrich dropped me from his arms and strode away. Everyone looked to me for an explanation, but I couldn't take my eyes off of his retreating form. Within seconds, I realized where he was going. He headed straight for Rose, who was crumpled against the wall, crying. When Aldrich got to her side, Rose stretched out her arms and hugged him about the neck. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, and I could feel the noble's eyes on me. Aldrich had thrown me over in front of everyone. I felt the blood drain from my head, spots danced across my vision, and then, as if Aldrich couldn't give them any more to talk about, he picked Rose up in his arms and left the ballroom. Whispers swirled around me.
My God! So it's true that the king loves the concubine.
But I heard that she was a runaway slave.
Nonsense! The king told me himself that it was just a rumour.
Wait, does Elisaria allow runaway slaves to become concubines? That's not possible in our northern kingdom. I even brought the Sea of Jewels as a gift.
I'm sure the king has done nothing of the sort.
I forced myself to walk calmly, even though every fibre of my being wanted to run from the throne room. As I climbed the grand staircase, how was it only moments ago that I had made my unified entrance with the king? I could feel the weight of judgment upon me. I thought I heard footsteps somewhere over my shoulder, but I refused to look back. Finally, away from the throne room, I stumbled down the empty palace corridor, trying not to cry. Sir Artemis, my ever-present shadow, fell into step beside me.
Are you all right, Your Highness?
I'm fine.
Forgive me, my queen, but you look pale. Allow me to escort you to your chambers.
I thought I would crumble then and there from that small show of kindness. When I nodded, with tears brimming in my eyes, the old knight offered me his arm and led the way. The moment I was alone, I threw myself onto the bed, hugged my pillow and curled up to cry. My whole body, even my soul, felt unbearably heavy. I looked up to find Majesty sitting on the windowsill. Even the sight of the midnight hawk very nearly wasn't enough to break through my darkened mood, but he looked at me with such concern, blinking his large eyes. Dragging myself to the window, I opened the casement and took the bird into my arms. As heat spread from his warmth, feathered body into mine, I burst into tears all over again. Majesty made a series of tiny noises, all the while rubbing his feathered head upon my tear-stained cheeks. How could this creature provide such great comfort? I soaked in the warmth that Majesty gave me, like a person abandoned in a bitter winter. By the time I had calmed down, I realized that I had been hugging the bird for far too long. He was probably annoyed. But when I looked up, I found that the hawk was simply peering at me. Thank you. You always give me strength. Sometimes you're just like a real person. Majesty's eyes widened, and he looked as though he was going to take off back out the window. But before he could spread his wings, I heard a knock on the outer door of my chambers. Majesty landed again, his agitation having been quelled by the distraction. Not sure what this could all be about, I nonetheless quickly dried my tears, smoothed my skirts, and signalled for permission to come in. My ladies-in-waiting tumbled into the drawing room, upset and worried, including Countess Eliza and Lady Laura. They had come straight from the party. Your Majesty, are you all right? In truth, Countess, no, I am not. But strangely enough, I am in no mood to be consoled. But my lady, no one would judge you if your pride was injured. There was nothing untoward about your reaction. And yet it somehow seems that Aldrich and Rose are the ones who have retained their dignity. I don't think that's entirely true, Your Highness. Either way, I thank you all very much for your concern. Your endless loyalty to me is touching, and appreciated more than you know. However, I don't feel that I can speak on it just now. Not just yet, at the least. Will you ladies leave me for the night? Eliza, perhaps you could stay and help me with my dress. The ladies-in-waiting nodded, but as they curtsied, they couldn't help but glance at each other. And now that I studied them more closely, I saw how nervously Lady Laura kept touching her curls, and how Countess Eliza fanned herself far too rapidly. What is it? Tell me. Your Majesty, there is something else. There was a messenger from the Verdi estate. The Verdi estate? From the Viscountess? Yes, Your Majesty. The message said that Viscountess Verdi regrets to inform you that she can no longer serve as a lady-in-waiting for the Queen. Viscountess Verdi? Hadn't she borrowed money from me only a few days ago? I had understood her situation to be desperate then, but I couldn't see the connection to her resignation now. Are you certain? I asked, but they all nodded. I looked on in bewilderment. Her household was in terrible debt because of her husband and son, but not enough to leave them homeless. And surely that meant that Viscountess Verdi would need the income she received as my lady-in-waiting to pay it off. I couldn't understand how that would lead her to quit. There must be more to this story. I'll need one of you to go and check on her, and find out the root of this situation. Yes, Your Majesty. The whole time I had been receiving the news, Majesty hadn't budged from my side. I stroked his back, seeking comfort once more. Because somehow, I knew that Rose had something to do with this. The next day, the tension surrounding Viscountess Verdi's situation seemed to dissolve, as our fears were proven to be unnecessary. I entered the banquet hall for the second day's festivities, relieved of the obligation to stand alongside Aldrich. The hall was bustling with noblewomen, including Countess Eliza and Laura, and even Princess Astrid from the Southern Kingdom. She embodied the Southern ideal, sweet, generous, and a master of conversation. Her charm drew everyone's attention, and as she spoke, she suddenly glanced over her shoulder and said, "That's her." Curious, I turned to follow her gaze. It was Rose, walking alone, her smile radiant as she greeted those around her. She shone even brighter in the daylight, a captivating presence. I averted my gaze, knowing that if our eyes met, she would approach me, feigning sisterly affection. However, this time, it was Laura who gasped in disbelief, her eyes fixed on Rose. "Oh my God!" I turned to look at her, noticing the shock on Laura's face. Curiosity piqued. I couldn't resist inquiring further. "What is it?" Laura's response came with an unmistakable glare directed at the concubine. "The blue silk she's wearing. Your Majesty, isn't that the one Grand Duke Lavilla tried to give to you?" Turning my gaze back to Rose, I observed that Laura's words rang true. Rose was indeed adorned in a gown of exquisite blue silk, the very fabric that Grand Duke Lavilla had once offered me, with certain unspoken strings attached. Around us, the ladies clicked their tongues in disapproval, and whispered amongst themselves. They obviously wondered the same thing that I did. Did Rose accept this silk in exchange for carnal favours? "Grand Duke Lavilla is truly incredible," one lady muttered. "I know." Another joined in. "He moved as soon as he was rejected by Her Majesty." Countess Eliza, her voice tinged with confusion, added to the growing murmur. "I don't think the silk was the only thing that went from the Queen to her." Her words sparked my curiosity. "What do you mean?" Before Countess Eliza could respond, my attention was drawn back to the scene unfolding before us. Amid the crowd, I spotted Viscountess Verdi standing next to Rose. It was startling to see her there, especially after she had informed me just the day before that she could no longer serve as my lady-in-waiting. I hadn't noticed her initially, as she was obscured by others, but now it was unmistakable. Laura, who had expressed her concerns about Viscountess Verdi all night, spoke up. "I can't believe it! Is she mad?" At Laura's outburst, Rose and the Viscountess turned to look in our direction. Verdi's eyes met mine for a fleeting moment before she quickly averted her gaze, a clear sign of discomfort, or perhaps guilt. I felt a surge of confusion and betrayal. Viscountess Verdi's sudden resignation, coupled with her appearance alongside Rose, was a puzzle with missing pieces. The situation was growing more complex by the moment, and the undercurrents of court intrigue were becoming increasingly apparent. Why would Viscountess Verdi align herself with Rose, especially now? Countess Eliza leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Your Majesty, it's possible that Viscountess Verdi is seeking a new patron. Aligning with Rose, especially given her current favour with the king, might be her way of securing her family's position. The revelation was bitter. The court was a place of constant manoeuvring and shifting alliances, but to witness it so blatantly was still disconcerting. My mind was already formulating a plan. We need to understand the full extent of this. We cannot let such developments go unchecked. As I stood there, absorbing the scene before me, the gift of blue silk from La Villa, once a source of amusement, now felt like a slap in the face. My former lady-in-waiting, Viscountess Verdi, stood beside Rose, the woman who had ensnared my husband. The same woman who had borrowed a substantial sum from me. The irony was not lost on me. Viscountess Verdi, who had once been the most vocal in her mockery of Rose, now aligned with her. Countess Eliza and Laura were speaking beside me, their voices a distant hum as I grappled with my thoughts. What was I to make of this? Was it embarrassment, disbelief, or a sense of betrayal that I felt? Was Rose here to take everything from me? A thought struck me, cold and unnerving. Perhaps Viscountess Verdi had never truly been my ally. Perhaps her loyalty had always been for sale, and I had been nothing more than a means to an end. Yet I knew I could not afford to show any sign of being flustered. Princess Astrid, witnessing the spectacle, clicked her tongue in disapproval. I don't understand the concubine system. There is no such strange system in the Southern Kingdom. In polite terms, she's a concubine, but isn't it still cheating? But since the law approves of her, she holds her head high without realizing how shameful it is. Laura chimed in, her voice rising in defense. It is as you say. Isn't it strange how she can pass in front of the Queen with her back held straight? Their words, meant as support, only served to remind me of the precariousness of my position. Ignoring their continued conversation, I turned my attention to selecting the sweetest mead available. Yesterday, I had fled my seat in a moment of weakness. Today, I resolved to stay as long as possible, to show no sign of defeat. Despite appreciating the support from Princess Astrid and the other ladies, discussing such matters in public was the last thing I wanted. The banquet hall, with its prying eyes and whispering mouths, was no place for airing personal grievances or speculating on court intrigues. As I sipped my drink, the sweet liquid did little to mask the bitterness of the situation. The court was a treacherous sea, and I was adrift amidst its waves. Each whispered word held weight. I needed to navigate these waters with care, lest I find myself submerged by the tides of court politics. The whispers and veiled glances around me only intensified my sense of isolation. It was a bitter realization that while everyone presented a facade of respect, their true opinions lurked beneath the surface. They likely thought little of me for, as they believed, sending gifts to Rose, and I could only imagine the gossip that would spread like wildfire behind my back. Seeking to steer the conversation away from this uncomfortable topic, I gently suggested, "Shall we talk about something else?" My voice was calm, but there was an underlying plea for a change of subject. Princess Astrid, understanding my predicament, gracefully shifted the focus of our conversation. "Oh, I heard an interesting story about Prince Henry this morning." "An interesting story," I echoed, my curiosity piqued despite itself. She continued, her eyes twinkling with the thrill of sharing court gossip. "Yes, it was when we were eating together in the Imperial Palace. I heard he exchanged letters anonymously with someone in Elasaria." "An interesting story indeed." "Apparently, he said he wanted to find them, and that they should meet him at the Imperial Palace. The gossip is everywhere." Do you know who he may have been writing to? Princess Astrid shook her head, her expression one of amused bewilderment. Who knows? The story has so many versions. I think it's someone within the castle. The king's new concubine, perhaps. It's a secret many here will be keen to uncover. With a chill running down my spine, I knew that the princess was right, and if the realm ever discovered my secret correspondence, what would become of me then? In the grand hall of the castle, under the watchful gaze of ancient tapestries and flickering torches, my ladies-in-waiting turned their eyes towards me as one. Their gazes, sharp as the swords of knights, bore into me with unspoken questions. What troubles you, my ladies? Princess Astrid, her eyes as piercing as a hawk's, followed their stares and turned to me. A silent understanding passed between us. They all harboured the belief that I was the enigmatic confidant whom Prince Henry, in his veiled messages, sought. A heavy silence fell upon us, as thick as the castle walls. My mind wrestled with the same thought. Could it be that I, the Queen, was the owner of the mysterious bird, a creature rumoured to be linked to Prince Henry? The possibility seemed more than a mere coincidence. The ladies-in-waiting lingered in their anticipation of my response. Yet as I remained cloaked in silence, they, with the grace of courtiers, suddenly shifted their attention to other matters. Princess Astrid's interest was soon captured by another intrigue, but Laura, ever so bold, leaned closer. Your Majesty, that bird, that majestic hawk, does it not remind you of Prince Henry? Countess Eliza, her wisdom as deep as the ancient forests, nodded in agreement. Indeed, Your Highness, the whispers of the court suggest this rumour involves you. The other ladies-in-waiting looked upon me, their eyes alight with the glow of excitement and curiosity. With a heavy heart, I finally spoke. I, too, share these thoughts. Their faces lit up like the dawn, but my next words cast a shadow upon their mirth. Yet I shall not step forward in this matter. Your Majesty, would it not be a grand alliance to befriend someone as noble and fair as Prince Henry? Imagine his joy upon discovering this secret correspondence is none other than the Queen herself. Their words spun around me like a dance, but I remained steadfast. I desire to remain a friend unseen and unknown. Their faces fell, a garden of flowers wilting under a harsh sun. Laura's voice, tinged with dismay, was quickly silenced by a stern look from Countess Eliza, who seemed to understand the storm of thoughts within me. When she spoke, her voice was as cold as the northern winds. Prince Henry, though charming, is entangled in scandals as numerous as the stars. Should it come to light that his private letters were exchanged with the Queen, it would cast a shadow upon Her Majesty. Her gaze drifted across the room, landing on Rose and Grand Duke Lavilla, who stood in raucous laughter. We must tread carefully, for the court is a nest of vipers, eager to strike with rumours and deceit. It was only after Countess Eliza's words that realization dawned upon Laura, and she nodded, a newfound understanding in her eyes. But still, there lies a sadness in my heart.
Around and amongst Rose, laughter and chatter filled the air like the songs of nightingales. The nobles, draped in silks and jewels, revelled in drink and the latest scandal. Rose, her beauty rivalling that of the dawn, lounged in her chair, a vision in an ornate gown gifted to her by the king. Cheryl fanned her gently, while the Grand Duke Lavilla leaned in, jesting and full of mirth. "Why so silent, Lady Rose? Surely you are not the author of those scandalous romantic letters?" But a voice sounded from the crowd.
It is not Lady Rose.
The Grand Duke's eyes flashed. "Ah, well, lady or otherwise, would not Miss Rose's sweet words ensnare even a prince like the infamous Henry? A man with his reputation surely couldn't resist." Rose merely smiled, unwilling to give the nearby nobles any hints as to what she did or did not know. She gestured for the conversation to flow on, musing on the nature of gossip, a serpent that slithered through all layers of society, from the lowliest slave to the loftiest aristocrat. As she sipped her tea, her eyes caught Viscountess Verdi, silent as a shadow.
Viscountess Verdi, are you unwell?
In the dimly lit chamber, adorned with the banners of ancient houses, Rose addressed the Viscountess with a gentle tone that belied the undercurrents of courtly intrigue. Verdi, startled from her reverie, offered a hesitant smile, her eyes reflecting the flicker of nearby candles, but kept her silence. However, Rose pressed her.
Do you yearn to return to the Queen's service? That path is closed to me now. I am now in the service of Miss Rose.
The nobles, previously engaged in their own murmurs, ceased their chatter and turned their attention towards the Viscountess. A hush fell over the room, as if the very walls were listening. Rose, her curiosity piqued, studied the Viscountess's profile, noting the lines of loyalty and hardship etched upon her face.
Viscountess Verdi, should you wish to return to the Queen's side, speak freely to me. Truly, Miss Rose, I desire not to return.
But the Viscountess responded hastily, too hastily. And as the air grew thick with unspoken truths, Rose sensed the unsteadiness in her voice. Viscountess Verdi, once a steadfast companion to the Queen, now found herself in Rose's service through the machinations of Baron Lant. Her allegiance, bought with coin that she so dearly needed, was a testament to the ever-shifting sands of court politics. Rose, aware of the Viscountess's precarious loyalty, regarded her with a mixture of respect and wariness.
It is not a longing for the Queen that troubles you,
Rose pressed, her intuition sharp as honed steel. The Viscountess, caught in a maelstrom of memories, confessed.
When they spoke of Prince Henry, I was reminded of a secret concerning the Queen. What ties bind the Queen to Prince Henry's quest?
The Viscountess, her hands trembling like leaves in a storm, revealed the heart of the mystery in a whisper so hushed that no other but Rose could hear.
The elusive correspondent of Prince Henry's letters. It is none other than Her Majesty the Queen.
Rose's eyes widened in shock. Even Cheryl, ever the silent and keen observer, paused in her duties, taken aback by the revelation. Rose leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper.
Is this truth? Yes, my lady. But the Queen, in her pride, will not reveal herself to Prince Henry.
Cheryl, unable to contain herself, let out a soft giggle.
Could it be that the Queen and Prince Henry exchanged letters unbeknownst to each other? The Queen is now aware, but it was not always so.
The Viscountess paled at her own admission, the weight of guilt descending on her, along with a gnawing fear that she had set in motion a series of events with dire consequences. Rose, her mind a whirlwind of plots and possibilities, remained silent, contemplating this newfound knowledge. The Viscountess watched her, anxiety etched on her face. After a moment that stretched like the long winters of the north, Rose spoke again.
Viscountess, are you privy to the contents of these clandestine letters? I only know of the earlier exchanges.
A mischievous smile played on Rose's lips.
What if we were to lead Prince Henry to believe that Cheryl is his mysterious correspondent?
The Viscountess stifled a gasp.
To deceive a member of the royal family. It is but a harmless jest, or mostly harmless.
The Queen will not step forward, but this could be an opportunity for Cheryl. But such deception.
But Rose wasn't listening. Her expression gleamed with the possibility of revenge on the Queen who had thus far shunned her at every possible turn.
How did they manage to exchange these letters? Through a go-between, perhaps? Oh, Viscountess, don't look so troubled. If the prince discovers the truth, we shall claim it was all in jest. Who knows? Perhaps he will be smitten by Cheryl.
In the dark of night, within the shadowy corridors of the imperial palace, where the whispers of the past seemed to echo through the stone, a woman of modest bearing intercepted a knight, his armor gleaming. Though uneducated, she could tell that he didn't hail from Elasaria, but from the distant shores of the Celestial Isles, lands of mystery and ancient lore.
Whose errand do you carry so hastily?
I could ask the same of you, my lady. What brings you to the path of a knight?
I've heard whispers that Prince Henry seeks his mysterious correspondent.
At this, the knight's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking through his stoic demeanor. Are you the one that the prince cannot stay away from? The knight studied the woman before him more closely. Her humble dress, her ruddy complexion, her obviously dull mind, and his gaze turned skeptical. The maid, Cheryl, flushed a deep crimson, her voice trembling as she affirmed,
Yes, indeed I am.
The knight regarded her in silence, his thoughts unknowable, before finally gesturing for her to follow. Come, I shall lead you to him. Cheryl trailed behind, her heart a tumult of emotions. Rose had convinced her to play the part in the ruse, and though Cheryl was terrified, the prospect of winning the hand of a prince was too much to pass by. Viscountess Verdi had imparted to her the essence of the letters, but the most recent exchanges remained a mystery. Rose had assured Cheryl that knowledge was unnecessary, yet doubt gnawed at her. Here. The knight's gruff announcement apparently signaled their arrival at the prince's chambers. He knocked on the heavy oak door and waited. Yet no answer came. Time stretched on, the silence growing heavier with each passing moment. The knight muttered to himself, Perhaps His Highness is away. Stay here while I check. He instructed Cheryl to wait in the corridor, a space filled with the echoes of past intrigues, while he pushed into the drawing room beyond. Time passed slowly, a relentless reminder of her predicament. Finally, the knight returned. His Highness will see you now. Cheryl's heart skipped a beat. She followed the knight to the prince's chamber, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. This moment could spell her ruin or reshape her future, much like it had for Miss Rose. Cheryl's breath caught in her throat when she saw the prince. He stood near an open window, his appearance striking in the moonlight, his features more handsome than any rumor could capture, and, to Cheryl's delight, he was clad only in a loosely tied robe. He was like an angel descended to earth, yet his sharp violet eyes hinted at a depth more akin to a devil than a celestial being. A chill ran down her spine, her instincts screaming to flee. But as their eyes met, Prince Henry's expression softened into a gentle smile, momentarily easing her fears. My lady, are you truly the one with whom I've shared my thoughts in letters?
Yes.
Cheryl was certain that the prince could hear her heart pounding against her chest. Prince Henry's eyebrows arched in intrigue. Are you certain? For the one I seek is dear to me beyond measure. Her heart raced, the prince's words carrying an unspoken warning.
and as he stepped closer, Cheryl could see the hint of a snarl playing on the curve of his lips. "My lady, I shall ask you one more time, for it wouldn't do to lie to me. Are you the one I seek?"
Yes.